Graham, thank you very, very much for that very kind and warm introduction. It's great to be back in Boston, and certainly great to be here at Boston University in the conference, Cities and Kids. And so, Graham, again, thank you for the invitation. Thank Boston University and the Initiative on Cities and the School of Public Health. Thank you for hosting and having this conference. To the couple folks who, you don't just end up at one of these conferences, and so both to Catherine Lusk and to Patricia Cahill, thank you for helping to make the arrangements for me to be here. Boston is, of course, one of the great, great cities, not just in the United States of America, but in the world. We'll put aside for this afternoon's discussion any of the typical Philadelphia-Boston, Boston-Philadelphia rivalries going back at least to 1770s or so, and we've been competing with each other ever since. I do love this city. Let me also thank a very good friend and someone that I admire a great deal and have had the opportunity over the past few years to work pretty closely with, and that, of course, is the great mayor of Boston, Mayor Marty Walsh. He is a great friend, he is a great leader, and he's also one of the nation's great mayors. He has stood out among many of our colleagues on the issues of children, certainly the most recent challenges involving immigrants to the United States of America, but also his commitment to President Obama's My Brother's Keeper. Mayor Walsh is known as a very, very strong supporter. And at my last time at the White House with President Obama, and we were talking about My Brother's Keeper, of the many, many mayors who could have been asked, Mayor Walsh was asked to speak about Boston and the work that's being done here. He's a great local leader, but also a fantastic national leader as well. This is the right issue at the right time for America and the world. It appears that I may have done something to the, that usually happens. You know, we're known best for what we do for our children. We're known best for what we do for our children. Notwithstanding the introduction, let me tell you just a little bit about myself. Born, raised, educated, and created all of my trouble in the city of Philadelphia. It is my home. It is my city. I was fortunate to be a member of Philadelphia City Council for 14 and a half years, the mayor for 2 terms. We have term limits in Philadelphia, 2 consecutive 4-year terms, and I came out of office in January of 2016. And a few months after that, as Graham mentioned, became the inaugural David N. Dinkins Professor of Practice in Urban and Public Affairs at Columbia University. I've had and still have some pretty great titles, councilman, mayor, professor. But the most important title that I will ever have is dad or parent. And when all is said and done, that's all that's really going to matter in my life and for many of us. What did we do for our children when we had the opportunity? As I mentioned, I served as mayor of my hometown from January of 2008 to January of 2016. Today, I want to address my remarks to the theme, Setting an Urban Youth Agenda. Many of my remarks, of course, will be filled with some Philadelphia examples, but quite frankly, many of those examples can be replicated in cities and our rural communities all across the United States of America. There are 5 issues that I'd like to touch on: poverty, literacy, early childhood education, men and boys of color, and crime, public safety, and community relations. First and foremost, of course, there is no one perfect plan. There are many ways to take on these issues and challenges, but you do need a plan. We created one in Philadelphia, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we did. Excuse me. For decades, Philadelphia has had and continues to have a very serious poverty problem. And certainly in the years during and since the Great Recession, our poverty rate unfortunately grew and subsequently come down a little bit, while at the same time, federal, state, and philanthropic resources were shrinking. Today, our poverty rate stands at about 26%, and it's actually a little lower than it was at the height of the Great Recession. But nonetheless, unfortunately, Philadelphia still suffers with the highest poverty rate of the 10 largest cities in the United States of America. And equally, if not worse, is the fact that our poverty rate has been over 20% for the last 30 years. 30 years. Over 400,000 Philadelphians live in poverty, including 39% of our children, 27% of working adults, more than 15% of our senior citizens, and about 200,000 of our neighbors are trapped in deep poverty, which is a measure defined as 1/2 of the federal poverty line. Poverty disproportionately affects single mothers, African Americans, Latinos and Hispanics, and people with disabilities. And thousands of Philadelphians hover just above the poverty line, scraping by with only the barest of necessities. Poverty is, in fact, a persistent problem in Philadelphia and in many cities across America. It's intergenerational. It hurts the entire city, the economy, development, education, health, wellness, the housing market, and opportunity. There is a tangible cost to poverty as well. Fewer dollars spent on local goods and services, and fewer dollars circulating in the economy. Fewer companies may locate in a city because our workforces may not have the skills or education level needed to fill even open jobs. There's an increased cost to the city for providing services and an increased burden to our taxpaying citizens. But it's not only about the lost revenue or dollars and cents. It's about people, limited opportunity, depressed human potential. Each year, thousands of our fellow Americans are sharply limited by their personal circumstances. In our cities, we never benefit from their knowledge, their creativity, their abilities, because they never had the opportunity to develop their God-given talents. They never had the chance to build better lives for themselves and their families. And so in many ways, certainly Philadelphia and many other cities are thriving. In my city in particular, our population has been growing for the last 8 years. New businesses are starting, staying, and growing in Philadelphia. And crime has generally been on the downturn. But Philadelphia and so many of our cities cannot flourish if we don't address excuse me, and reduce the devastating problem of poverty. We can't afford the costs or the opportunity that is lost. Early in my tenure, we worked hard to improve educational outcomes, develop workforce and job training programs, target crime reduction, and address nutrition. And yet, our efforts had not been as coordinated, integrated, and as thoughtful as they could be. So in January of 2013, I signed an executive order creating the Mayor's Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity. Of course, no government could run without acronyms, and so we called it CEO. Its goal was to harness and advance the city's anti-poverty work while integrating our efforts in so many areas: nonprofit providers, consumers, the business community, academia, and the philanthropic community. Well, this is very personal for me. As a kid who grew up on Larchwood Avenue in West Philadelphia, where so many families had a difficult time just making ends meet, I understand that making it is not easy. I would never have become mayor of my hometown if it were not for people who gave me opportunity and empowered me to obtain the skills and education I needed in order to make a difference in society. It's about choices and opportunity and systems that work because of individuals, many of you in this audience and many others, who have worked hard to help others to thrive. Let me make one quick point. Now, historically, the primary responsibility to address poverty has been the federal government, and to a lesser degree, state governments. From Social Security and Medicare to food stamps or SNAP to the Earned Income Tax Credit, the federal government had the resources and the scope. to make things different. But Philadelphia, at the same time, had a long history of fighting hard for what we believe in, with a range of programs, initiatives, and funding. We do care about our own, and we do our best to help all of our citizens, which is why our plan was all about shared responsibility, shared action, and shared prosperity. In the months after signing that executive order, CEO and its oversight board worked intensely, conducting analysis, gathering data, and they created our plan to fight poverty. It's called Shared Prosperity Philadelphia. They interviewed more than 200 anti-poverty experts from city government, nonprofits, and academia, as well as anti-poverty consumers and providers. They held meetings and focus groups, conducted surveys. To put it simply, the plan was designed to maximize every anti-poverty dollar that came into the city while also seeking new funding. We must ensure that every citizen receives the benefits and services for which they are eligible. We must harness the collective energy and expertise of the organizations and institutions already working on anti-poverty issues. We must break down silos, and we must encourage collaboration and communication. And success means nothing less than changed lives. Shared Prosperity Philadelphia is a reminder that poverty touches all of our lives, and that we all have a role to play in reducing its damaging effects. You know it's not easy, but of course, it's necessary. Next, I want to focus our efforts in literacy by our work and support for the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading by third grade. Third grade represents a critical tipping point for our students and young people. The educational approach shifts away from learning to read to reading to learn. In fourth grade, students begin working on much more complex material. And when a student lacks the reading proficiency skills to comprehend that more difficult content, they are much more likely to fall behind. Studies, including work done by Project U-Turn in Philadelphia, show that reading proficiency by third grade is the most important predictor of both school success and high school graduation. 74% of students who read below grade level at third grade struggle in later grades and are often likely to drop out of high school. In the United States, only 1/3 of public school fourth graders are proficient readers. This continues to be a challenge in my city, but we've made some progress. And there are, of course, some proven ways to help these young leaders get caught up and back on track. High-quality early learning programs, early education like Head Start and pre-K. These programs help to better prepare our children for classroom learning and later ensure the school success by improving their socialization, reducing behavioral issues, and easing the transition process. Our administration strongly supported early education programs. In fact, early education is one of the 5 focus areas of the Mayor's Office of Community and Empowerment and the Shared Prosperity Plan. We must also reduce absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is a major indicator of whether a student has fallen off track. There's a strong correlation between chronic absenteeism and dropout rates. We also launched the Attendance Awareness Campaign, an effort supported by Project U-Turn to make students aware of how critical school attendance is to classroom success. Summer reading is very important. Our free library and the Department of Recreation both offered reading and after-school programs that work to keep young people active, to keep them engaged, to keep them learning during those months when they're not in school. We must realign the teaching practices all the way from pre-K through third grade. Encouraging and ensuring our young people are prepared and have the skills they need for school success is a team effort. We will not improve on grade level reading proficiency in Philadelphia and other cities without support and certainly more public funding from our states and our federal government. Let me talk about an even younger cohort. That's those from birth to 5 years old. In July of 2013, as I mentioned, we launched Shared Prosperity, the city's comprehensive plan to assess, address, and reduce the effects of poverty. And right after that, I asked a very important group of leaders to challenge our community and our city again and to embark on a new effort. I want to mention those four folks, not just because of their names, but also because of their titles and their work. Of course, the Executive Director of the CEO Office, but also Police Commissioner Charles Ramsey, School Superintendent Dr. William Hite, and Chairman Emeritus and Senior Advisor at the Vanguard Group, a leading business person, Jack Brennan. This leadership group was critical to generating community support for this new effort. And so not too long after launching Shared Prosperity, we launched our early education plan. Its name is A Running Start. It's supported and a part of the Shared Prosperity Plan, and its goal is to increase educational attainment to reduce poverty. A Running Start, that plan we developed to support Philadelphia's children and families by building stronger schools to create a more competitive workforce. High-quality early learning is a proven way to help overcome poverty, which is why we need to make it a part of every child's birthright in America. And Philadelphians clearly recognize the importance of this issue. In a survey of likely voters, more than 3/4 identified, quote, ensuring all children arrive in kindergarten ready to learn is an important value. In May of 2015, my last year in office, an overwhelming percentage of voters, more than 80%, called for the creation of a city commission on universal pre-K. Voters agree that the city should consider implementing universal pre-K, which we're in the process of doing now. The purpose of the commission was to develop an implementation plan and a funding proposal for high-quality universal pre-K for all 3- and 4-year-olds in Philadelphia. The results of the commission's work were delivered to the mayor and city council in April of 2016 for the full consideration by the city's elected leadership. Education investment must start early, before the achievement gap is too wide and very costly to overcome. When all children arrive at school ready to learn, they are best able to take advantage of the educational benefits of classroom learning. A major study published by Stanford University noted that the achievement gap may begin as early as 18 months old. And then at the age of 2, the difference increases to a 6-month achievement gap. And by 5 years old, it can be as much as a 2-year learning gap between those children. As a result, disadvantaged kids start school so far behind that they may possibly never catch up, especially because they regress, some of them, in the summers without important out-of-school learning opportunities. Some of the most significant research in poverty-fighting methods comes from the success of programs to actually coach at-risk parents, which can also be found in our plan to give children a running start. We can start in infancy, or we can wait and jail a troubled adolescent at the tail end, which is quite honestly what this nation has been doing for a long time. To some extent, we face a choice between investing in children at birth or in prisons. Well, obviously, the prisons are not working. Like Shared Prosperity Philadelphia, a running start follows the philosophy of collective impact. It removes barriers to effective collaboration among public, private, and nonprofit organizations addressing early learning issues. Specifically, it has created a public-private organization to coordinate this plan with a variety of stakeholders, parents and caregivers, more than 3,000 licensed child care providers, early childhood funders, local, state, and federal agencies, advocacy groups, philanthropic organizations, business leaders, and the providers of technical assistance and professional development. We developed an early learning policy and agenda for advocacy while continuously measuring the impact and revising it for maximum effectiveness. In Philadelphia, like many other cities across America, too many of our citizens continue to face enormous challenges that impede progress and stifle opportunity as they all set out to achieve the American dream. The only way that we can expand opportunities and move toward that dream is if we all move forward together. In September 2014, I readily accepted President Obama's call for cities to lay the groundwork for the My Brother's Keeper Community Initiative. The President charged us all to develop comprehensive cradle-to-career strategies that aim to address the interconnected and complicated issues that have plagued many for generations, particularly boys and men of color. We know the problems: disproportionate rates of poverty, limited economic opportunities, elevated instances of crime as either or both victim and perpetrator, and poor educational attainment. My Brother's Keeper is based on a belief that we as a community have a shared responsibility to talk about these issues, regardless of how difficult or uncomfortable they may be. And ultimately, we must work together to find solutions that will ensure that every person has an equal chance to succeed. Let me give you a sense of not only how impactful this work can be, but how you must stay focused and committed on this work. During my time in office in 2014, MBK Philly, under the umbrella of the Mayor's Office, took various strategic steps to address this important initiative. In September, we joined the President's Challenge, and the MBK Philly Working Committee was formed, consisting of more than 20 City of Philadelphia staffers from various departments and offices. In October, all city departments, agencies, and key partners, such as the school district, our Philadelphia Workforce Development Agency, and the Philadelphia Youth Network, participated in a policy review. In November, the city hosted 130 stakeholders from across public, private, and nonprofit sectors, while also hosting U.S. Transportation Secretary Anthony Foxx and local young people of color. Over the following months, we held additional listening sessions with various groups, organizations, communities, and particularly with young people. At all of these sessions, we received feedback, recommendations, and participation from Philadelphians across the city. In February of 2015, I hosted a summit on youth safety in partnership with the Youth Violence Reduction Collaborative at Temple University. Every day, every week, every month, action moving forward. And so Philadelphia became possibly the first, if not the first, big city in America to develop and propose a plan that addressed all 6 MBK benchmarks comprehensively. This blueprint outlined our collective ongoing efforts to improve outcomes for young people while providing a necessary and sustainable platform to keep moving this work forward. There is no one solution. It will take the collective imagination, a little creativity, often a little luck, and a whole lot of energy. No one person or group can tackle this challenge without the help, coordination, and dedication of others. Yet despite many gains in a variety of areas in our city, there's still too many facing seemingly insurmountable challenges. More than 36% of young people in Philadelphia live in poverty. 20% are African American, 9% are Latino, nearly 4% white. And living in poverty clearly affects educational attainment. 51% of Latino men, 46% of African American men do not graduate from high school on time. Of men between the ages of 16 and 24, over 30% are unemployed. 40% of those are young black men. In an average, in Philadelphia, 80% of homicide victims, 75% of perpetrators are young black men. 30% of inmates in the Philadelphia prison system are black men ages 15 to 25. These are not just statistics. These are real people. These are our young people. And that's precisely why our My Brother's Keeper plan and the Forward Thinking Action Plan that we developed, we thought was so important. We must capitalize on existing strategies and objectives while highlighting the need to continuously evaluate outcomes through a disparity lens. And while we know the path forward may take time and that we're going to encounter barriers and obstacles, we must remain committed to the idea that future opportunity should be available and can be achieved by all including our young men of color. They matter. All of our children matter. And as adults, it's our responsibility to help them in every possible way. That's why in my last submitted budget for FY16, I proposed that Read by Fourth Grade, a citywide grade level reading program, would receive a $1 million investment. $3 million invested to help create summer jobs for young people through our Philadelphia Parks and Recreation and other departments. A $3 million increase for our Community College of Philadelphia to ensure that college tuition did not go up in the 2015-2016 school year. So many American cities face violence, poverty, and a lack of opportunity, and they're all interconnected. When we address poverty, we will in fact move the needle in creating more education and opportunity and reducing violence in our communities. When we provide opportunities to young men of color and help them stay out of trouble, we increase the likelihood that they will graduate from high school and go on to higher learning and get a good job. When we keep our kids in school, we reduce the chance of them committing crimes or perpetuating a life cycle of poverty. These are the chronic challenges. These are the major issues that are holding so many of our cities back. And it will require that broad coalition of the concerned if we are going to make a difference, that our children will be smart, safe, and secure. But if we put our minds and our hearts together, if we pull in the same direction, if we cut out some of the adult nonsense, then all of our young people, all of our children, will have a brighter future. And that brings me to the last point, but it's critically important. It's a critical component to setting an agenda for our urban youth. And this issue is now more critical than ever. This is about the relationship between communities of color and law enforcement, and what we can do to provide opportunities for young people, especially young black men, to lift themselves up and out of poverty and away from negative situations. Cities United was established in 2011 as a national movement focused on eliminating the violence in American cities, especially for African American men and boys. The participating cities, represented by mayors and other officials, made a commitment intended to reduce violence by 50% by the year 2020 in each of their cities. Moreover, they're committed to restoring hope in their communities by building pathways to justice, employment, education, and increased opportunity. Now, some may ask, why young black men especially? Why focus on race? And why does race matter? Well, race matters because more oftentimes than not, African Americans in general still face incredible challenges. Deficits in educational attainment, job attainment, and financial security, and excessively high levels of incarceration, poverty, and poor physical health. And so the answer is a resounding yes, race matters. Even after all that we've been through in the Civil Rights Movement, Brown versus Board of Education, the Voting Rights Act, right up to the election of the first African American president of the United States of America, systemic racism still exists, and we must address it. Cities United was founded at a time when every 24 hours in America, 14 young people were gunned down on the streets of our cities. The past few years in Philadelphia, we've made some progress, but stubbornly, here are the consistent facts in my city. 40% of homicide victims are young people 24 years or younger. Further, about 75% of homicide victims and 80% of the known perpetrators who are arrested for violent crimes in Philly are young African American men. This is not an anomaly. This is a fact of life in our country. In the United States today, on average, 1 in 3, that would be 1 in 3, African American men will have contact with the criminal justice system at some point in their lives. We've seen in the past an article in the New York Times about missing young men. Men who are missing from everyday life because they're either dead from violence or health issues or they're in prison. For every 100 black women ages 25 to 54 who are not in jail, there are only 83 black men. The remaining, about 1.5 million nationally, are missing. How do we confront violence that is so deeply ingrained in generations of families? Behavior that is decades in the making. Crime and violence are not created in a vacuum. People are not born bad. Something happens along the way. There are a series of moments in their lives that set them on a path toward making good or bad choices. And therein lies the hope. If there are moments in a child's life when they have choices to make, then there are opportunities for all of us to provide them with the knowledge, the tools, the support, and guidance in advance so that they are empowered to make the right choices. We need to help our children navigate the dangerous forks in the road. We need to start paying attention to every single child. We need to envision every child as having something that I started to call in Philly an ISP, an individualized success plan. We need to help young people at critical points in their lives through a web of overlapping institutions and services that create one comprehensive safety net, a safety net of security which will catch and protect children who are growing up in dangerous environments. I believe we're up to this task. Cities United has grown to support a national network of mayors and other elected officials committed to working in partnership with community leaders, families, and young people, philanthropic institutions, government officials, and a variety of stakeholders to reduce the epidemic of violence plaguing black men and boys. Philadelphia, our approach was to take a thoughtful, long-term view of these and other issues, with an emphasis on community, on creating opportunities, and about building more trust between the police and our citizens and the police. We focus on bringing more resources from the state and federal governments to issues like education, economic development, poverty reduction, summer jobs, after-school programs, healthcare, and reentry initiatives. We've also taken a listen-first approach to policing when engaging with the community. We also started to take a very hard look at ourselves when evaluating our own policing practices. We actually asked the Department of Justice to review our police department's use of force policies so that we can improve our own training to reduce the number of incidents involving police and citizens. We received their report, we created a plan, I established an oversight board to ensure implementation of their recommendations. We're going to see it through for years to come. This will not be solved overnight, and there are no easy choices. As cities, we cannot be afraid to examine ourselves this way. All cities need to confront this issue. President Obama's task force on 21st century policing issued its report in 2015. I was honored that President Obama asked my police commissioner, Charles Ramsey, to co-lead that effort. The report is available to mayors and city council members and all leaders across the country who want to review its recommendations and implement changes in their departments. And so I've tried to give you a sense of some of the fundamentals of our plan to address the many challenges that I talked about, the ones that face us. It's just what we did in Philadelphia, and you can certainly do the same here in Boston or in your cities back home. But let me finally say this. You are the key to setting an urban youth. You are the key to setting an urban youth agenda. You, your work, your focus, your commitment, your determination. Make a plan. Work the plan. Stick to the plan. Don't get distracted. Block out the noise. Narrow your focus. Expand your stakeholder table. Communicate your goals loudly and broadly, and hold yourselves accountable. And do this work every day. Every day. Our children are listening. But more importantly, they're watching you. Thank you.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Time for 2 questions.
Ooh. Clearly, I've talked too long. Don't be shy.
So earlier today we were talking about the importance of creating political will. You obviously, possess that in spades. How do we as a community create the political will, particularly in the current environment, to create the momentum needed in communities around these kinds of efforts?
Well, I think, without getting too political, the wonderful and great thing about cities is that, most days, mayors, city council members, local elected officials, we have to get stuff done. A lot of that chatter and conversation and a bunch of that noise out of Washington, D.C. On most days is meaningless to most people. I assume the day after the election, trash probably got picked up here in Boston. Water probably came through the pipes from the water department. Traffic signals worked, a bunch of other stuff. And so, it would be great to have a better partnership with the federal government. Who knows what this current administration will actually do with cities. The budget as proposed, from my perspective, is a complete and utter disaster and an affront to cities all across the United States of America. But at the same time, we have work to do. And I think what you're doing here and what the university and the relationships and the leadership by, at least in this city, I know from Mayor Walsh, that work has to continue. And, we'll fight our other battles about what the feds are doing or what states are doing. But I think this is the era of cities. Cities are on the rise. People want to be in cities. Cities are taking prominence across the country, and quite honestly, at least in my opinion, local government is about the only level of government that actually is working. When you have a snowstorm here, I don't think anybody's sitting around making a speech about it. They're trying to figure out where to plow and how am I getting out of my driveway. So, local government has to work because people have that expectation.
One last question.
Hi. So full disclosure, I'm a resident of Philadelphia. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
And so thinking about the policies or initiatives related to children and youth, what do you wish that you had been able to accomplish during your 8 years as mayor, and what stood in your way?
Yeah. As you can imagine, I get that one from time to time. So it is, my response is always, first, because I'm a recovering elected official, I can't give you one answer. But the reason it's 2 answers is because they're so intertwined with each other. So when I talked about, I didn't go into much depth on it, but we've spent a lot of time and attention on public safety and education. During my 8 years, we had a 31% reduction in homicides in Philadelphia. There are some young people alive today because of the work that we did, but there are still far too many being shot or killed. And so, positive, we did a lot. If it's going to be a negative, I want it more. And the same is true in education. We had about a 53% high school graduation rate when I came in. Today it's 68. I wanted 80. So progress, not enough. And I think what stood in the way on the education side, some of that was certainly funding, but that was not the entire story. I think I'll leave it in the context of, adults not always doing right by children and not always making the right decisions based on what the kids need versus what the adults want. On the public safety side, being preempted by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania from taking legislative action, for instance, on illegal guns on the streets of our city, literacy challenges, employment opportunities. I mean, we have got to get to the heart and soul of why so many people shoot each other. We had some success, but I wanted more. So they're on the same coin.
Thank you.
Thank you.